Accessing peace. Existing without violence, with the ability to calmly resolve conflict. Downloading love. An overwhelming, deep, positive affection towards others. Activating liberty. Living your life as you see fit without infringing on the lives of others.
Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com, the final Peace, Love, Liberty Radio of 2016. And aren't you glad it's almost over? Aren't you glad? I know a lot of people are saying, that they cannot wait until 2016 is over, and I joked in episode 400 that 2016 will go down in history as the year that shall not be named. And, I don't know if I'm grateful that 2016 is done, because on the one hand, it's just a year. There is no, past, present, future, or there's no past and future. It's all the present, right? So I don't think that, the world is just going to all of a sudden change and things get much better when January 1st rolls around. But I know a lot of people are excited about that. But since this is, the end of the year, not the end of the world, just the end of the year, I wanted to continue what I began on Monday, and that is doing a year in review. And again, I'm going through some of the numbers from Gallup because I find it very interesting to see the way that people respond to things and to see, how many people respond a certain way. Because it's not enough to just, read the news and tell you that presidential politics dominated the headlines. Hillary Clinton, the political insider, took Donald Trump, the billionaire outsider, took on Donald Trump, the billionaire outsider. In the end, the bombastic businessman defeated Clinton, and the U.S. intelligence community now believes that Trump may have had help from Russia. It's not enough to just do that and read the headlines and read a story. I like being able to delve in to see what people actually think, how people respond to things. And that's one of the things that I like about polling companies, to where they do sort of, give you that glimpse into what people are thinking. Now, there are times, and I've been critical of polling companies previously, because, there are times when they'll ask a question in such a way as to where they get a certain answer. And now I know that you're never going to wind up, convincing 95% of the people to go along with what you want, but you can word questions in such a way, and there have been studies on this that show that if you word questions a certain way, you can manipulate the answers, and then you pick and choose which one of those responses you wind up making public. But we've gone through some of these, and again, the full list from Gallup will be in the show notes. I didn't put it in the show notes on Monday because I didn't want to spoil the surprise. So, jumping down to, I think, the third item on their list, most Americans in 15 years say their tax bill is too high. That's right. The largest number of people, and it's now a majority of Americans, say that their tax bill is too high. And this survey actually corresponds with a period of time earlier this year when taxation is theft was at astronomical heights of searches, where more people were searching for taxation as theft than they have in nearly a decade. And again, 57% say that the amount of theft done by the federal government is too high. Jumping into the actual report of the study, they say as the deadline looms, and again, this is from April, as the deadline looms for filing federal income taxes, 57% of Americans say they are paying too much in taxes, a 6% increase from last year, and the highest percentage in 15 years. The last time prior to 2001, the numbers actually went down after 2001, which seems kind of odd, but they were in the high 50s and 60s throughout most of the 90s. The highest number that Gallup reports is from 1969, when a whopping 69% of Americans said that taxes are too damn high. Now, there is about 25% in 1969 that said taxes are about right, and a minuscule percentage where they're not even showing a number and it's barely registering on the chart said that taxes are too low. Now, that number of people saying taxes are too low has gone up a little bit from what it was in 1969, but they're still not actually showing what the number is on the chart. 37% of those surveyed said they think taxes are about right. And yes, there's a partisan gap in the views of the fairness of taxation, as the percentage of Republicans earlier this year saying that they pay too much increased 10% to 73%, while the percentage of Democrats increased only 3% to 44%. So, again, 44% of Democrats, and those are the people that everybody says loves taxation, nearly half, 44%, that's close to half. That's 4.5, almost 4.5 out of 10, right? So that's almost half, if you're doing some rounding, of Democrats say that taxation is too high. There's more on this, but I'll just put the link in the show notes. Go back to Gallup's year in review, where they continue that Russians' approval of U.S. leadership drops to 1%. Just 1% of Russians, and that's right, they polled people in Russia on this one. Just 1% of Russians approved of U.S. leadership in 2015, the worst rating in the world that year. And I'm pulling up this report to find out exactly what they have to say here. Again, just 1% of Russians approved of U.S. leadership. Remarkably, this is even worse than their previous record low of 4% approval in 2014. The current record low rating of 1% in Russia reflects the increasingly tense relations with the U.S. since the crisis in Ukraine. And this poll was done at the end of last year. It would be interesting to see how things match up now, especially with the news that happened yesterday. Stay tuned. This is Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and numerous supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $1 per month through Patreon and get perks like ad-free versions of FPP Radio News and Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. That's fans.fppradio.com.
Cell 411 is a free app for Android and iOS that replaces government-controlled 911. Cell 411 allows you to preset a group of friends or private organizations to show up in any emergency. Cell 411 is a nightmare for the state because it proves their so-called services aren't needed. Cell 411 has had thousands of installs, and of course it's covered by the BIPCOT no government license. Cell 411 because your friends won't shoot you when you're in trouble. Without the government, who would build the emergency services? You and Cell 411. Get it today at getcell411.com. That's getcell411.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
So what happened yesterday that could drive Russian approval of the United States below 1%? Yeah, that's right. If you did not hear, President Barack Obama expelled 35 diplomats, Russian diplomats, that he accused of spying and interfering in the U.S. election. Don't want to go off on a rant on that, but if you do want to hear some rants on that, I'll post the link to the Thursday night episode of Free Talk Live in the show notes, because that was a topic of discussion last night. And then it somehow devolved into a conversation about Edward Snowden, because the caller called in to say, Edward Snowden's in Moscow, ha ha ha, suggesting that Snowden is somehow in cahoots with the Russian government, because why else would he be in Russia? Well, probably because the U.S. government revoked his passport while he was on an airplane from Hong Kong to Moscow to catch a flight to Ecuador. You know, when you wind up having your passport revoked while you're on an airplane, it's kind of hard to make your connecting flight because, yeah, if it's an international flight, they check your passport before you get on the plane to make sure everything's working okay and whatnot, that you are who you say you are. You have the ability and the authority to go where you're attempting to go. So U.S. government revokes his passport. He's stuck in Moscow. And now U.S. government officials are saying he's working for the Russian government. Why else would he be in Moscow right now? Because of you. That's why. Not you, the listener. You, the bureaucrat that wound up revoking his passport and forcing him to be in Russia. Continuing on now, changing gears here, or not necessarily changing gears, but going back into the gear that we were on to begin the show. I guess that's begin and continue simultaneously. We're going to begin you here with the Gallup year in review. Republicans and Democrats interpreted the Orlando shooting in different ways. The mass shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando in June shocked the U.S., but Republicans and Democrats interpreted the tragedy differently. 79% of Republicans viewed the incident primarily as an act of terrorism, while 60% of Democrats said it was an act of gun violence. And again, there's a link that I will post in the show notes where you can delve into all of the numbers on that if you like. Here's something that strikes me as very interesting, and I will delve into this a little bit more. Americans' trust in media, specifically mass media, and this was done back in September, so it was the survey was done before the whole, fake news drama that started up on Facebook and elsewhere that I think was largely fabricated by people making fake news about fake news, saying that people are going to prevent somebody from posting satire on the internet. I can't believe they'll do that. And somebody saying that Alex Jones and The Onion are exactly the same. Well, no, that's not what they said. What the report, and I saw the report by this college professor before it wound up getting amended and then taken down completely, where it was saying, here are sites that are either satire, sensationalism, or things that are making fake news. They're not necessarily satire, they're just putting out fake news stories but passing it off as legitimate. And there were notations for each type of site. And yes, The Onion and InfoWars were both on there, but they had different notations. The Onion was notated as satire. InfoWars was notated as sensationalism. And if you can't tell the difference between satire and sensationalism, you've got bigger problems than reading a story about fake news. But I digress and continue with the actual survey done by Gallup in September. 32% say that they have a great deal or a fair amount of trust in mass media. 14% of Republicans expressed trust, which was down from 32% from 1 year prior. And confidence drops among younger and older Americans. Again, the actual report says Americans' trust and confidence in the mass media to report the news fully, accurately, and fairly has dropped to its lowest level in Gallup polling history. Now, granted, the polling history only goes back to 1997, but still, it's very interesting looking at this survey, or rather the chart of ratings, where back in 97, 53% of Americans had a great deal or a fair amount of trust in mass media. And then you see it stay steady until 2003, and then it drops. What happened in 2003 and 2004? I wonder. Oh, right. Was that when the very trustworthy mainstream media said that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and it was absolutely undeniable, and anybody that said that Saddam didn't have weapons of mass destruction was some kind of conspiracy theorist? And, of course, America should go in and blow up Saddam Hussein because he's got weapons of mass destruction. And then it turned out that Saddam did not have weapons of mass destruction, and George W. Bush at the Correspondents' Dinner even made a joke about Saddam not having weapons of mass destruction when he told the joke, and I quote, "They've got to be somewhere, maybe they're under here," and he looked at the podium. Yeah, that's what happened in 2003, 2004, and then there was a slight uptick in 2005 from 44% to 50%. So it took a 10% hit from 03 to 04. And then it slowly dwindled from 50% since 2005, again, all the way down to 32% of Americans that say that they have a great deal or a fair amount of trust in the mass media. Now, Gallup did begin asking the question in 1972, but it's not been done yearly except since 1997. Gallup says that the high point was 1976 when 72% of Americans said that they had a great deal or fair amount of trust in the media. That was in the wake of a widely lauded example of investigative journalism regarding Vietnam and the Watergate scandal. What else happened in 2016? Stay tuned, and I'll tell you here on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio's Year in Review.
During the 2013 Porcupine Freedom Festival, Davi Barker presented an idea for a renegade psychological experiment. Since then, he has refined his idea and put his plan and research into writing. He explains, "We aim to show the world beyond a shadow of a doubt that power corrupts absolutely and corrupt authority deserves no obedience." Authoritarian Sociopathy is available from Amazon.com, all major bookstores, and now available as an audiobook. You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates, like Namecheap, Spendabit, and Amazon at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. Or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. That's shop.fppradio.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry. Online at fppradio.com.
Hey, welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. I am your host, Darryl W. Perry, the Liberty Penguin, the Wombat, the uncut cocaine of libertarianism. And this next item is fairly interesting. And I can guarantee you that depending on the demographic that you're in, you may or may not agree. And I'll explain here. Gallup reported in October of this year that 3 in 4 Americans say they have a great deal of respect for the police in their area. That's up 12% from a year ago, and almost as high as the high point of, it looks like, 1968. In addition to the large majority of Americans expressing a great deal of respect for their local police, 17% say they have some respect, while 7% say they have hardly any. Gallup has asked this question 9 times since 1969. The percentage who say they respect the police is significantly higher than in any measurement taken since the 1990s and is just 1 point below the high of 77% recorded in 1967. So incorrect there. The chart makes it look like 68, but was in fact 1967. The latest figures from October 5th through the 9th in their annual poll on crime shows Americans' respect for police increased as the number of on-duty police officers who were shot and killed was on the rise. What they don't mention here is that the number of people killed by police has also been sharply on the rise. Let me go to the website killedbypolice.net, where thankfully some investigative journalists have been doing their damnedest to keep an accurate tally of the number of people killed by police. And so far they are showing through December 28th, 1,146 people killed by police in the United States. This does not include the number of dogs that have been killed, nor does it include the number of people that have been seriously wounded by police. And I know some people are going to say, well, those people are criminals. They deserved it. No, I'm sorry, but no one deserves the death penalty, especially when it is done roadside by a police officer. And I know some of those weren't on the road, but still, there should not be split-second decisions where somebody decrees themselves judge, jury, and executioner. I'm sorry, but it should not happen. If you believe that, certain people deserve to die, okay, well, do you also believe in the rule of law that says that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process? Where is the due process for these 1,146 men and women and children that have been killed by police officers who decreed themselves judge, jury, and executioner? And to then see a poll saying that 76% of Americans have a great deal of respect for police, and for Gallup to wind up saying that this is on the heels of the large number of police being killed and shot on duty. Well, where's the outrage? Where is the outrage? I'll tell you where the outrage is. The outrage is coming from the African-American community, where people are wearing shirts that say, I can't breathe. People are wearing shirts saying Black Lives Matter, and some people, their egos are so fragile to where they see that Black Lives Matter shirt and they say, well, all lives matter. Yes, they do. They do. They certainly do. But I never heard a single person say all lives matter until I heard somebody say Black Lives Matter. And the people that say all lives matter, or, blue lives matter, specifically those people will say that, well, the Black Lives Matter people have an implied only in there. No, they don't. They have an implied also. Do white lives matter? Yes. Do Asian lives matter? Yes. Do Black lives matter? Yes. There's an implied to, not an implied only. The people that go around with the blue lives matter, they have the implied only. Because they will say these people have families that they need to go home to at the end of the day, and they need to make sure that they're safe. So you're saying, if you honestly believe Blue Lives Matter, if you have that bumper sticker, if you've got the Blue Lives Matter flag, what you are saying is that the only people whose lives matter are the police. What the people wearing the Black Lives Matter shirts are saying is that our lives matter as well. I'm going to go to the next item from Gallup before I wind up getting too incredibly frustrated to continue this show. For many Americans during the election campaign, news about Clinton equaled emails. As far back as August of last year, that being 2015, when asked what they had read, seen, or heard about Hillary in the past day or two, most Americans frequently cited emails. That trend continued throughout 2016, and with a few exceptions, up until Election Day. Americans' recall of what they read, saw, or heard about Donald Trump, however, varied widely depending on the news reports about him. There's more that we'll try to get to here in the closing moments of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio's 2016 year in review.
In 1999, Darryl W. Perry began a search for traditional values, which led him down a path to the ideas of liberty. He tells the story in A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty. Of the book, Dr. Brian Sovereign says, sometimes it's funny, and sometimes I think it's crazy, but it's always authentic. Find A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty by Darryl W. Perry on Facebook, read reviews on Amazon, ask for A Rebel's Journey wherever books are sold, or visit arebelsjourney.com.
It is the year 91,001 BCE. Witness humanity's origins in Hyperchronius, a classic role-playing game for Windows PCs with a story like no other game before. A liberty-oriented experience that is not to be missed. Go to ZOG.Ninja to get your copy of Hyperchronius today. Use the code FPP to get $1 off. Hyperchronius, ZOG.Ninja, code FPP.
This is Jeremy Scott, host of Dark 30. You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. Continuing with the year in review, Gallup says fewer Americans in this decade want to lose weight. The percentage of U.S. adults who say they want to lose weight in the 2010s is down from what it was in the 2000s, yet fewer Americans overall say that they are overweight. Still, many more Americans want to lose weight now than they did in the 1950s. American support for the Electoral College has risen, despite what some people may be reporting. Yes, the support for the Electoral College has actually gone up. Obama's job approval rating jumps to a 4-year high. This despite the vote going against Hillary Clinton, who a lot of people saw as sort of the de facto incumbent. Support for Barack Obama is at 57%, his highest in 4 years. And they say the post-election bounce was reminiscent of bounces that several lame duck presidents have enjoyed in the November of their second term. And a record high 77% of Americans perceive the nation as divided. So, well, what I'm seeing here is Americans can't agree on much, but one thing they can agree on is that we're divided. After Trump won the contentious election, a record high 77 people, which is up from 69% in 2012, said the United States was divided on the most important values. More Americans said Trump would divide the nation than unite it, and the percentage who said Trump would unite the country was lower than the percentages who said the same about incoming Presidents George W. Bush and President Barack Obama. And satisfaction with the direction of the United States is steady but low. After perhaps the most unpredictable and unprecedented election in U.S. history, a low of 27% of Americans said that they were satisfied with the things, or rather with the way things were going in the country. This continued a trend of low satisfaction that began during the presidency of George W. Bush and persisted under Obama. And let me jump into these numbers just a little bit. The highs were back in, looked like 1998 and 2000 at 60%, 1986 also 60%. 1992 had a low of 21%, with looks like 2008 having the lowest rating of 15% of people satisfied with the direction of the country. This is Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. I'll be back next year answering your questions on Wednesday, AMA at fppradio.com.
The podcasts of FPP Radio are licensed under Copy Heart. We believe that copying is a form of flattery and do not abide by the copyright laws. Those laws serve to restrict the flow of ideas which no one can really own. Copying is an act of love. Love is not subject to law. If you enjoy the show, consider joining the Fans program and get perks like ad-free versions of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio and FPP Radio News, and also get a copy of the monthly newspaper FPP News. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com.